Hi, I'm Yasmin, a wife and a proud new mom with a background in perinatal nursing. Welcome to Birth Unboxed, where we talk about all things birth, whether it's unassisted free birth, home birth with a midwife, or in a hospital. I believe every woman deserves the right to choose how and where she gives birth. I created this podcast to raise awareness so women can make informed choices and feel empowered in their births. By sharing stories and learning from one another, we can reclaim our power and become the ultimate authority in our own birthing experiences. Sisterhood is powerful, and I am so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Birth Unboxed podcast. I hope everyone has been having a lovely week. So it's the beginning of the week for Hustanya and I, who I have with me in the studio today. So Hustanya, thank you for joining me. I've known Hustanya since we were little girls, so it's very
Yeah.
special to get to have these chats now about birth and motherhood. So thank
hmm
you. Thank you
Thank you
for
for having.
joining me. It's my pleasure. I've been wanting to get Stania on board, and she's finally been convinced. I told her it's for good reason, sharing these kinds of stories. Every
hmm
story, no matter how similar they are, there are unique aspects to them, and
hmm
it can be the unique aspect in your story that's going to help someone else out. So I think
hmm
it's very important knowledge that we share, and I think it's so important that we as women and mothers share our stories and talk about these things more with other moms and future moms, and not only the good parts, but the bad parts and things that we wish we had known, because for most of it, a lot of women just, oh, I'm pregnant, my OB will take care of it. I'm just gonna show up at the hospital and they'll do what they need to do, and they don't really know much. So
hmm
I feel like there is a bit of a rise where women are starting to be like, okay, I want to understand. I want to be part of the process. I
hmm
want to be better informed. So I think with these stories, it really helps women learn a little bit more and be more informed. So let's get
Definitely.
into it. You have two birth stories for us today.
I
One is
do.
a birth center story, and
Yes,
one is a home birth, right?
that is correct.
Okay, I
Yes.
can't wait. All right, take us to the beginning.
Yeah, so when I wasn't even pregnant, this was probably a year or two before I was pregnant. I was seeing a naturopath for some health issues that I was having and dealing with it that way. And so she was asking me about, future plans for, if I was interested in having a family one day, things like that, just so that we knew where to take, my care. And so I said, yeah, for sure, definitely interested in having a family. Not ready for it at this moment, but like we're gonna get there. And one of the things that she mentioned was that, okay, well, you have options. You don't just have to have an OB. And I was like, okay, what do you mean? She's like, well, you can have a midwife, a doula, things like that. And I think maybe it's a generational thing, but we've just been so conditioned that the only option is to go to the hospital and see an
Yeah,
OB, and
totally.
that's just kind of what I assumed would be my path. But it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until talking to her that I was like, oh, so I have other options. And she was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, well, and in Ontario, like midwife care is covered through our health plan. And I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is
Yeah.
incredible. Okay,
Yeah.
have other options. Just because historically I've been really nervous at the hospital. I don't know
Mm.
if it's the sterility of it, you know, it's where you go to get better. A lot of sick people around. So I've always been,
It's also where you go to die.
yeah,
A lot of people die in hospitals. Like majority of people end up dying in hospital.
in
Like I'm pretty sure that's
hospitals.
like
Yeah,
a correct statistic that sick people go to the hospital and they usually die
they
there.
die.
So
Yeah,
it's not like a nice place. Like I can't wait to go to the
no.
hospital.
Exactly. And so like hospitals have always made me nervous, and I know, like, not afraid, but like just a little bit kind of
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of not even having to option the hospital as long as I had
Yeah.
a healthy and normal, so to speak, pregnancy
Mm-hmm.
was really appealing
Yeah.
to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of it too is the epidural terrified me. Um,
Mm.
I'm not, queasy when it comes to needles, but I'm someone who has to
Mm-hmm.
know what's happening to them. So,
Yeah.
like, I can get my blood drawn no problem, but like I have to look at it happen. And
Yeah.
so, like, I'm not someone who needs to look away. Like, I need to see it
Mm.
coming. I need to
Oh
expect it.
yeah.
I need to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
So the idea of having, an epidural, something in my spine that I would have no
Yeah.
control over, that I couldn't see it happen,
Yeah.
was very scary to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where I started, like, I'm an obsessive researcher when it comes to certain things.
Yeah.
So I just like the same day I went home and I'm like, okay, online, what are my options? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of how I got into midwife care. My
Okay. Very
very
interesting.
first
Yeah.
appointment when I got pregnant was with an OB because I was
Mm-hmm.
waiting to hear from a midwife clinic near where I lived. And so then I went to my first OB appointment. It was very like, okay, like, when was your last period? What's your weight? How far along do you think you are? Calculate. Okay, well, like, this is the hospital you're gonna give birth at. And I'm like, excuse me,
Yeah.
because they're assigned to specific hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, I don't like that, but okay. And then it might not be me. It's a team of 10 OBs and it's
Yeah.
whoever's
Yeah.
on duty. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, I'm a little uncomfortable with that already because then
Yeah.
it's like you're in a very emotional,
Yeah.
very painful
Yeah.
experience most
You have
all of the
no
time.
idea who you're gonna
And then you
get.
show
Yeah.
up and you're like, okay, I'm here. Who's it gonna
Yeah.
be? You
Yeah.
know? So that was really, I was like, not, I didn't feel great about that. And then luckily, shortly after that, I heard back from a midwife clinic, and I lived in Toronto at the time. And I went through all of my care with the midwife, and I thought that was lovely. Like, I saw the same two people every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and It was great. I really liked the experience. My husband went with me every time. Yeah, so the care was going great with the midwives, just the regular visits, checkups. It was really positive. And even with my husband, he doesn't have experience with kids. And so for him, it
Mm.
was really good to like ask any questions, be able to form a relationship with that person. And one thing I didn't mention is I was pregnant, like I gave birth right before everything shut down for 2020.
Uh,
And so even up until the point where I gave birth, like we had gone to the birthing center in Toronto and did a tour. And if anyone is in Toronto, highly recommend. It's a
I've
beautiful
only
space.
heard great things,
Oh
so
my goodness,
that's
the
lovely.
rooms are
Yeah.
lovely. Like it has everything you could need
It's
in like a
amazing.
birthing experience. And so like highly, highly recommend.
Such a
Um,
shame that there's only one.
there's only one, I
Like
know.
and in the east, it's so far. Like it's
Yeah.
mostly in the east, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was great. So we did the tour, and when we did the tour, they were like, "Hey, it was this beautiful waiting area for family and friends to like wait while you're giving birth." And they're like, "We don't really have a limit of how many people you can bring with you. It's, like you can bring your family, bring your
Wow.
friends, as long as everyone is respectful, of like,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
understanding that there are women who are giving
Yeah.
birth here, and maybe you're not the only one."
Right.
And so it was like a beautiful space.
That's
And
so nice.
yeah, and so I really loved it. And then um, shortly before my due date, they were like, well, things are kind of, changing in the environment and healthcare. And so we don't know if you'll be able to bring anyone with you except for one person.
Mm.
And so up
Yeah.
until the very last minute, I waited to see if maybe I could
Mm.
still bring my mom. It was not
Oh.
possible.
Oh no.
Yeah, because she was so excited and
Yeah.
she was still holding on to the hope, and so was I. Like I was in labor and I was
Yeah.
still holding on to the hope
Oh
that I could tell
no.
her, "Hey, meet me there," you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's sad.
So
Yeah.
that was like quite an interesting experience. I was
Mm-hmm.
very lucky and blessed in the sense that my husband could still go with me to all the appointments because everything kind of like all the restrictions really got like in place around the time I gave birth. So he was able to go to the ultrasounds and things like that. So I was really
Good,
lucky
good.
in that
Yeah.
way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I know a lot of moms, and first-time moms had to do it
Yeah.
alone,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it was just you and the health practitioner.
Yep.
And so, but even until when I decided to option the clinic, I had so much, I wouldn't say pushback, but apprehension from my parents, especially
Mm-hmm.
because it was like, well, are you sure you don't want to go to the hospital? Like, this is your first
Mm-hmm.
time. Things can go wrong. You want to have a doctor there. And I said, well, the midwives are just as qualified to deal with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And this is all they do. This
Yeah.
is their sole
Yeah.
purpose is to
Yeah.
will help
They
babies come into
actually
this world.
know. They've actually seen a whole physiological birth from start to finish.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think also because my mom had, for with me and my sister, both her pregnancies were very high risk. And so
Hmm.
her fear, she had preeclampsia with me.
Okay.
It was like an emergency C-section when she had
Mm.
me. So I think there was a lot of fear around complications in birth.
Right.
But I had like
And
a
also
very,
the Brazilian culture, right? She's
yes,
Brazilian, and in
yeah.
Brazil, they love hospitals and
They love
C-sections.
hospitals, and it's so funny because like I find it so interesting how like things so change so quickly within like, the span of like a generation
Yeah.
because like all of her brothers and sisters were born at home with
No.
midwives really,
Yeah.
except for I
Yeah.
think her youngest sister was born at a
Mm-hmm.
hospital, but she's
Right.
like one of nine who were all born at home. And then like so
Exactly.
quickly the hospital became the standard,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really like adamant that I didn't, and also I didn't want to, I'd heard so many stories about women being pressured into Pitocin, into an
Mm-hmm.
epidural just to kind of speed things along. And I didn't want to speed things along. Like, if everything was going well, if there were no signs of distress or something going wrong, like I didn't want to force my body to do something that it was naturally going to do anyways, just
Yeah.
given a little bit of time,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? And so, so then come April 17th, my son was born on the 18th. I started like I was just like washing dishes, and the thing is, I never had Braxton Hicks. I didn't have like practice labor pains. Like I didn't feel anything. I felt completely normal and like
Yeah.
nothing until I was in labor.
I bet so
And
many
so
women listening are like, ugh, jealous.
I know, I know. I know my sister-in-law actually she had Braxton Hicks like for so long during her
Yeah.
pregnancy and they're like, "Oh, you're in labor." And she would be like, "No, no, no. I have really strong contractions."
Yeah.
And so like I had nothing. So I remember like washing the dishes at home and I remember being like, "Oh, I'm like cramping really bad." And I'm like leaning over the sink and I'm thinking, "Oh, like yeah, I'm like feeling pretty crampy." And then it almost like it hit me. It's almost like, "Hello, you're pregnant. You're having contractions."
That's hilarious.
And so it didn't really hit me until I was like I didn't really kind of it didn't process that I was in labor
Mm-hmm. How many
because
weeks were you?
I was 40 plus 2.
Oh, okay. And that's funny
Yeah.
because you were already full term, but I guess because
Mhm.
you were having such a comfortable pregnancy, you weren't like, you need to come out because a lot of women,
Yeah.
by the time they're like 37 weeks, they're like, yep, I'm done. You
I'm
can come
done.
out
I'm
now.
ready.
But you were
Yeah.
just like, oh, this is
I
nice. I
was
can do
chilling. I'm
this.
like, yeah, this
Yeah.
is good. And it's like not that I wasn't uncomfortable, like sleeping was uncomfortable. I was waking up every two to
Yeah,
three hours
yeah.
to go to the bathroom. Like I had like the lightning crotch, right, is what they call it. Like I had
Yeah.
but like in terms of like, I was just enjoying being pregnant.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of women don't enjoy the pregnancy portion, but I love being pregnant, like
Yeah, me
it was
too.
just such a good experience for me. I really enjoyed every
Yeah.
part of it. So I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm cool, I'm
Oh,
fine.
yeah. Such a
Hmm.
unique experience. Even with the
Yeah.
pains I had, I still love being
Hmm.
pregnant. Yeah.
Yeah. And so so then I started like, I realized, okay, yeah, I'm in labor. So then I told my husband we were both home. This was around I think maybe 5:30 in the evening.
Mm.
And And so I said, yeah, like I think I'm in labor. So we called the midwife, said we're pretty sure we're starting labor. She's like, okay, keep me posted. And they do the usual like, okay, like when you get to like I think it was like 311, 3
Yeah.
hours, 1 minute long contractions for
Um, a
the
contraction
3 hours.
every 3 minutes.
3 minutes,
That
yeah.
lasts for 1 minute. That you've had this happening for 1 hour.
1 hour,
Yeah.
exactly.
So sometimes they'll say 511, 411,
Mm-hmm.
three one
Mm-hmm.
one, depending. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
for
I
first
had
time moms, usually it takes longer, right? So they're
yeah.
expecting
So like
that.
So for me, she said, okay, 311. And I was like, okay. So then we downloaded a contraction tracker. We were doing it. And it was interesting because like my contractions, they never got to a place of consistency. So there would
Mm.
be moments where I would be like my contraction would last like a minute and a half, like 2 minutes, and I would just tell
Yeah.
my husband, just stop counting. Like it's not.
Yeah.
I think it's just one is rolling into the other at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And then it would like, and then I wouldn't have a contraction for like 5 minutes, and then I would have
Mm.
like a short one, and then a longer one, and it was so inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I called the midwife back a couple times and I said like, like it's really inconsistent and like we're timing it and it's
Yeah.
not making sense.
Yeah.
And then so she's like, "Okay, let me time you." So she would time me while we were on the phone. She's like, "No, you're not there yet. Your contraction
Yeah.
was only." And every time I
Yeah.
called her, it was like, "Oh no, it was 40 seconds." I'm like, "I just had
Mm-hmm.
a 2-minute long one that I stopped the timer for." You know?
Yeah. You're going
And
right by the
so
book.
yeah, right by the book. And so I said, okay. So then I was like, all right, so we'll keep waiting. So I was laboring at home. My parents are on standby on the phone, just like checking in. And so around, I think it was 11:30, because my water hadn't broken at this point. So at
Hmm.
11:30 p.m., my water breaks, like just
Mm.
all
Big
of like
gush.
just big gush, and
Mm-hmm.
my body like it just pushed, just started
Oh,
pushing.
started pushing. Yeah.
Just yeah, just started pushing like
Wow.
completely out of my control. And
Wow.
so I told and we did the whole like get into the hot shower, try to
Mm.
relax, soak in the tub, like get through those painful
Yeah.
contractions. I was walking back and forth because I couldn't sit still. I just needed to
Mm-hmm.
walk. So from like 5:30 to like 11 o'clock, 11:30, I'm like pacing back and forth. I'm in and out of the shower. I'm doing all of these things. And then 11:30, my water burst, and then my body just like I felt him just like lower, and like my body just started
Oh,
shoving.
wow. Yeah.
And so I started freaking out, obviously,
Yeah.
because I was like, we didn't even hit the threshold
Yeah.
for my contractions.
Yeah.
I said, call the midwife.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So my husband called the midwife and she said, okay, get to the birthing clinic now.
Like, oh,
Um,
you're one of those that did not follow the textbook? Okay, oops.
no, yeah, oopsie. And interestingly enough, I didn't even have my two midwives there. The
Hmm.
ones that I'd been with this whole time, I'd been calling them, but they had told me they were both actually sick with a stomach bug.
Oh my
And
God.
so I didn't even have the birth with the two midwives I'd been
That's
seeing for like
awful.
7 months,
Yeah. Oh,
you know?
that's
But
rare.
it's
Yeah.
rare,
Because
yes.
at
And
least it's
so,
one or the other. Yeah.
but I guess I don't know if because they were working together, they both caught the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And so, but it's so interesting because by the time I got there, I was like so ready to have this baby. Like
They
he's
didn't
like,
even care.
I didn't even care. I was like, I just need to, somebody, I
Yeah.
just need to have this baby. But so in a way, it was kind of like a blessing in disguise that everything was shut down because my husband just tore through Toronto to get to
Oh, that's
to get to
true.
the birthing center.
Yeah,
Like no
that's true.
traffic, no cars anywhere, like nothing.
If
And
anyone
so
listening does not live in Toronto, the traffic in Toronto is brutal. So,
at any
driving
time of
across the
day,
anytime, like sometimes even 4 in the morning. It's
anytime.
like, who are you
Yeah,
people on the Gardner? Like, what?
exactly. I've hit traffic at 4 in the morning going
Yeah,
to
it's
work, because
insane.
it's
Insane. Yeah.
crazy. So
But
then like
that's
we get
good.
in a car and like my mom it was funny because my mom is like, she's always thinking ahead, right? She's like, hey, you're
No.
getting close to your due date. You might want to put like a towel and a trash bag over the car
Oh.
seat because like you
Oh.
never know, right?
That's right.
And I was like, of course, mom's knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So of
Yep.
course, like 2 or 3 days before, we had covered the car seat, like the chair and
Yeah.
everything. And so we were like ripping through Toronto. We get to the birthing center, and we get in. My husband goes and parks the car, and then I start like waddling over to the bathroom. I always think this part's so funny. I start waddling over to the bathroom, and the midwife is like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "I have to go to the bathroom," and she's like, "Let me check you first." And then I said, "Okay." So she goes and checks. She's like, "You don't have to go to the bathroom. You have to have a baby."
Yep, you would have had your baby
So
right in the toilet.
exactly. And so
That's
yeah,
funny.
so then I started the laboring process. And I mean, again, as a first time mom, you don't really know what you're doing, right? And so I actually was side lying because that was like more comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like being my back wasn't comfortable. I don't
Yeah.
know. And that's one thing that always like in my research, I was like, being on your back giving birth is so counterintuitive to like
Yeah.
what we naturally want to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like just even when you get later in pregnancy, like at no point in time is
Yeah.
laying on your back a comfortable
Yeah.
position. Why
Exactly.
would it be comfortable giving birth?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, side lying worked well for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was pushing for about 15 or so minutes, and I wasn't pushing the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And the midwives gave me a little bit of a couple of pointers. She's like, you need to push like you're trying to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah.
Um, so I did that and instantly felt a shift. And
Yeah.
so 15 minutes after that, like Gideon was born. This was at
Yeah.
like 1:12 in the morning.
Oh,
And it was like just such a like the
that's
lights were
beautiful.
low. I had a comfortable
Oh,
place, like comfortable bed. Like the room was like super comfortable. Everything was kind of
that's
quiet.
good. How many people were in there aside from your
Just me and my
husband?
husband, just the two midwives.
Just two midwives and your husband. Yeah.
Two midwives and my husband and me.
Yeah.
And like they were like, drink juice, eat a snack, like you need to keep your
Yeah.
energy up, like we need you to, like you need to, you've lost a bunch of blood, like let's make sure that you're eating, that
Mm-hmm.
you're drinking. And so yeah, so then a couple hours later, we were cleared to go back home,
Yeah.
which is so fast.
So you lost
And
a normal amount of blood for you to have gone home after the 2 hours, which is the standard with
presumably,
midwifery care.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yes, you do lose some blood, but and
yeah,
sometimes it can
yeah.
look like a lot, but a lot of
Hmm.
times that's normal. Stuff's
That's
coming
normal.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so after a couple hours, I think we got home at around four or so
Oh,
in the morning.
yeah.
Yeah, and then my mom was there waiting for me. And when she heard I'd left for
Oh,
the clinic, she like went over to my house, like she had like cooked a meal.
no,
She like
of course you did.
cleaned a little, of course. She like cleaned a little
Oh,
bit, and like she was
so
waiting for us
cute.
to come home. It was great.
Oh.
Um, but it was honestly like the experience that I wanted to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel really lucky that I could have that experience because so often birth
Mm-hmm.
is so out of our control and you can
Yeah.
only plan so much.
Yeah.
Um, and I was very clear with with the midwives. I said, listen, like this is ideally how I would like it to go, but with the understanding that things don't always go how we want it to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And if I
Yeah.
need to go to the hospital, I need to go.
Yeah.
Like if for
Mm-hmm.
my safety and the baby's safety, that's what we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the clinic is really close to a local
It
hospital, so it
is.
was like
Yeah.
5 minutes away.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, so yeah, Gideon was born 8 pounds, healthy baby. They
Oh,
helped me through the first nursing experience.
good.
That was quite
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. It's
it's
not
a,
over after the birth. Now
no,
it's when it really gets spicy.
exactly, yeah. We had some struggles with the nursing a little bit, just getting the latch right. It was
Yeah.
like really painful for a bit there.
Mm-hmm.
And like now, having had two babies, I understand that like nursing doesn't have to be painful.
Mm-hmm.
And so just getting the right latch and like the right position is so important.
Yeah.
And so I did a little bit of consulting in that way.
And I think
Um,
it's important to mention it really depends on the baby as well. Like
mhm,
my baby had such a strong latch from the get-go, like
mhm.
insanely strong. And when we were in Australia, I breastfed my friend's baby a couple times and her like latch was so
So,
gentle. I'm like, I can
oh,
hardly feel her, like so
yeah,
sweet. And mine is
that's
like
so
trying to
sweet.
rip off my nipple, like so I'm just like, okay, like this is why, like, because it took me like
Mhm.
weeks for mine to like toughen up, I guess. But like,
Yeah, to like
Yada just
callus,
has,
right?
yeah, she has like
Yeah.
such a strong latch. So I think it also
Mhm.
depends. I've heard from other moms too that have had more than one baby that like, oh,
Mhm.
it was fine with one, with the other one, it was different. So I think
Yeah.
depending on the babies, it can also play into
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I found with my daughter, it was different as well because it's like, oh, I thought, oh, I got this because I've done it before. But then also my breast shape was different. And so
Yeah.
like adjusting that way too
Totally,
was
yeah.
like another experience because I thought, oh, like, yeah, I've got this. I've done this before. We got this. But even with her, it
Yeah.
was another type of like adjustment and struggle
Yeah.
to get there, to
That's
get to a
right.
good lot. Because what worked with my son didn't necessarily work with her.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so,
That's the other thing.
yeah.
Yep. That's
Hmm.
very
And she was
interesting.
a bigger baby, so
Oh yeah.
like my son was 8 pounds even, and she was nine
Mm.
pounds 10 ounces. And
Wow.
so, like, even
Yeah.
holding her
It
and
was
where my
different.
breast was sitting
Yes.
was like a different experience.
Totally.
I had to completely change how I did things.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so it
very
was
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay. So
yeah.
Gideon's born
Yes.
and the birth happened the way you wanted to.
Mhm.
Everything went
Mhm.
well, aside from
Mhm.
the fact that you couldn't have your mama there, which,
Yeah.
sucks, but it's very
Suck.
sweet. She was there ready for you, and it
Mhm.
was quick. The nice thing
Yeah.
about the birth center, you're in and out. Like,
Yeah.
it's quick, but,
Yeah, and they
sad you
want you
couldn't be
out
there. They
quickly
want you
so
out.
that
Yeah, the
well,
next
when you
person
come
can
down
come
from
in.
that adrenaline too, right? And like you kind of like come down from
Mm-hmm.
that, they're like, we want you to like kind of crash at home.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Like, you don't
know?
want to start falling asleep that you're like, no, 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 you gotta go. You
Yeah,
gotta go.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us now, how long after this pregnancy was the
Hmm.
next one? Like, how was,
Hmm.
just briefly mention how that first
Hmm.
year as a first time mom went and when you
Yeah.
felt ready for the next one. How was that?
My goodness, the first year was really tough
Yeah.
because so I was on mat leave for a year. I took the year, the 12 months
Uh huh.
that we have here in Ontario, and um, it was tough because like, everything was shut down, right? So I had
Yeah.
made so many plans for
Yeah.
like the time I was going to be off. We have family in Brazil, as you
Mm
know.
hmm.
I also have family in Portugal. And so I
Yeah.
had these like really beautiful plans of like when the baby's a little bit older, like once I kind of get settled, we're gonna go to Portugal, do a little bit of, visit our family there.
Yeah.
And then like
Yeah.
go to Brazil and like have the family meet him in Brazil. And
Yeah.
so I had all these grand plans and it was like really had to mourn the loss of those plans that were
Yeah.
unfulfilled.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and like truth be told, I did have postpartum depression,
Mm hmm.
which started around the 6 month mark, which
Mm.
was in retrospect, I think when I realized that like none of this is happening. Like I've been stuck at
Mm.
home for six
Yeah.
months
Yeah.
as a brand new mama. There aren't programs available to me. There aren't
Yes.
like none of my friends had kids. So like
Ah,
I was like I didn't even
really
have friends.
isolated. Yeah.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
isolated. And so I
Yeah.
had the support of my family, of course, but
Yeah.
I don't have extended family here either. Like there's no
Mhm.
cousins, no
Mm.
other cousins'
Yeah.
kids, nothing. And so the realization really hit me hard. And truthfully, I didn't realize that I had been struggling with postpartum depression until my son was probably around 2.5, 3 years old.
Mm.
And I think it's because I'd never struggled with my mental health.
Mhm.
And so many people, I think, during that time, during COVID, during the pandemic,
Yeah.
had struggled with it for the first time. And so I
Yeah.
had the added layer of being a first-time mom.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it really wasn't until years later when it still hadn't, kind of, I was still trying to like power through it, so to speak.
Mhm. Yeah.
When, my husband and I really had to sit down and I really had to look at myself and I sat down with him and I said, "Hey, you know, I think I'm struggling with depression." And he
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, yeah, you are."
Hmm.
Because he could recognize it, but I was so
Yeah.
reluctant to admit it.
Yeah.
Um, and especially because of someone, like, as you know, growing up in the church, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we lean so much on our faith and saying, like, I can't be afflicted by this because, like,
Right.
if I have God, what, like,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
couldn't possibly be depressed.
Yeah.
But that's really not true because we're human and
Of
we're
course.
flesh and blood
Yeah.
and we're afflicted by things. We're afflicted by
Yeah.
disease and mental health and
Totally.
all those
Yeah.
things, and sometimes we need help, you
Yeah.
know? So I
Absolutely.
did I did do therapy for a little bit, which helped
Good.
a lot.
Mhm.
And just to kind of put those things out there that I couldn't vocalize with the people closest to me because it was almost like I was almost embarrassed.
Yeah.
And so we we worked through that, and then we always knew that we wanted another child, at least one more. And I was still working through that and going through therapy when we got pregnant with Chloe.
Mm.
And that was another little bit of a struggle in and of itself
Mm-hmm.
because, like, with Gideon, it felt like we barely tried and we were pregnant. It was like
Yeah.
it was just done.
Yeah.
With Chloe, we were trying for about 5 or 6 months before we
Okay.
got pregnant,
Yeah.
and so for us, it was a little bit difficult because it's like,
Mm.
well, oh man, it was so easy the first time,
Yeah.
really,
That's very
and like.
common. Very common. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it was, my mental health was suffering.
Yeah.
My
Totally.
health wasn't where it was when I got pregnant with Gideon. Like when I was
Mm.
pregnant with
Yeah.
Gideon,
Yeah.
I was like the healthiest I'd ever been in my life. Like the
Yeah.
fittest I'd ever been in my life. Like my body
Yeah.
was so ready.
Yeah.
Um, but when I got pregnant with Chloe, I felt like I was the unhealthiest I was
Mm.
in my life, and like my mental health hadn't recovered. I was doing better, but I wasn't doing great,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, but between Gideon being born and Chloe being born, they're just about 3 years apart.
Okay.
So Gideon was two and a bit when I got pregnant
Uh-huh.
with Chloe.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so then we worked through that, and the
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy itself was similar, as in, like, I still really enjoyed being pregnant. I was really happy, really excited. I enjoyed the
Yeah.
pregnancy experience, but it was different. Like,
Yeah.
I was a lot bigger. I was more
Mm.
tired. I had a
Yeah.
toddler to
You
run
had a
around
toddler.
after,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Um, and my hours at work are really long. Like my shifts I work 12-hour
Mm.
shifts.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like, so I'm working 12-hour shifts. I'm coming home. I've got an active toddler at home and
Mm.
I still have all the
Yeah.
responsibilities. So it
Yeah.
was
It's a
so much
lot.
more draining.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
was,
no.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like with Gideon, I was like, I every so often I say to myself, like, remember those days when I'd come home and I just sleep? You know? Like, wasn't
Yeah.
that great?
Yeah. I always hear
But
that for first time moms that like you could just nap. And then
just
when you have a
nap.
toddler and you're pregnant, there's no
Yeah.
more napping.
There's no more napping, yeah. And
Yeah.
like I was still very active. Like when I was in Toronto, I was kickboxing. And
Oh,
so
nice.
so I still did that until I was about 8 months pregnant and
Wow,
like
that's
my
awesome.
body couldn't do it anymore. Yeah, it was great. And my instructors, my coaches, it was a husband and wife team, they had a baby as well, so they
Oh, cool.
understood how to coach
Hmm.
me through, still being
Yeah.
active while pregnant and
Mm-hmm.
making
That's
all the
so good.
modifications.
Yeah.
So I continued my physical activity throughout the pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really good for me.
That's
And I think
awesome.
that was part of, the one of the things that I said, like I grieved during, COVID was that like the gym was shut down, and
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
this thing that brought me so much joy because I really found a passion for this particular sport. Some
Yeah.
people love to go on walks, some people love to go on runs, other people love to go to the gym and lift weights. And like I found that kickboxing was like I really loved it as a form of physical activity.
Yeah. You gotta
And
find what
so
you actually enjoy. It makes the biggest difference.
exactly,
Yeah.
it makes like my husband loves going on long walks and he just puts on
Mm-hmm.
some music or listens to a podcast and he likes
Yeah.
going on long walks. And I'm just like, I'm not a walking person, you know?
Need a little bit
Um,
more, yeah.
yeah, I need a little bit more. And so when everything shut down, my gym also shut down. And then by the time it opened again, I'd moved out of Toronto. And so like I kind of lost that bit of community, that bit of like I would go there, it
Yeah.
was like a community, it was a family, it was where I could go and like,
Yeah.
like be with people, do something active, have
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Yeah. So good, yeah.
So yeah, so then, there was kind of like for a long time I like mourned the loss of that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so then with my daughter, the midwives after I had Gideon, they were like, hey, like for a first time mom, for a first time birth, like this happened
Mm-hmm.
pretty fast,
Yeah.
you know. At least at the time they told me the average labor for a first time mom is about 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how true that is or not. I just remember that's what they told me.
Mm-hmm.
And mine was about 8.5, from when realized I
I
was in labor.
wonder what those statistics are, if it's based on
Yeah.
like all women giving birth and if that includes hospital births and it includes
Mhm.
inductions, you
Mhm.
know? I feel
Yeah.
like. maybe because I feel like
And that's what I like.
naturally it's
Hmm.
usually longer, but it could be wrong.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I thought too. I'm like, well, 12 hours seems pretty fast for like a
Yeah.
first time mom.
Yeah.
Especially because like I wasn't even pushing right.
Yeah.
So it just feels like it would take
Yeah.
a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so anyways, with Chloe, we still had a very like healthy, normal pregnancy. A lot more tired than with the first time, but
Mhm.
overall everything kind of was like, everything was good. Um, all my tests came back normal, no gestational diabetes with either. So like we were kind of on the same track. And then because I'd had such a quick birth the first time, I thought to myself, it's like, you know what? I think I can do this at home.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah.
Um, and I talked to my husband about it and we were discussing and I said, I really want to do this at home. Also because, if the first pregnancy went as quickly as it did and I felt like, you know, if I had known how to push, I think the baby would have been born in the
Yeah.
car.
Oh yeah.
You
Oh
know,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
but I had no idea what I was doing, so that kind of delayed the process.
Yeah. Mhm.
And he said, okay, like if you feel comfortable with it, then like let's do that, and as long as everything goes well, that's what we'll option. And so again, same thing with my parents were like, okay, like I know you had the birthing center the first time, and the hospital was 5 minutes away, but like the hospital's 15 minutes away here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you're home, like you don't have equipment. And I said, and it was the same conversation. Um,
Mhm.
it's like, hey, like, like I've already done it once before. Like we're,
Yeah.
we're
And what a
gonna we're
lot
gonna
of
be
people
okay.
don't realize, midwives they bring all their equipment. They do bring all their
Mm-hmm.
resuscitation equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
very safe.
It's very safe,
Yeah.
yeah. And so by the time when I was pregnant with Chloe, we had moved out to Oakville, which is a few cities west of Toronto. And I was with a new midwife clinic, which also really loved them as well. Um, and they were great, kind of like it was my second go around with a midwife, so like kind of knew how this went, and,
Yeah.
and it was a very comfortable experience. My husband didn't feel the need to like go to all the appointments with me
Yeah.
anymore.
Oh,
I
because
was
they're
like,
so. Even with the midwife, since the appointments are
yeah,
longer than with an OB, it's still very like. Every time I would leave, I'll be like, I feel like I didn't need to come. But
yeah,
I think
right?
that's because like I also like could have done those same things they were doing at home. Like I have the equipment,
Mhm.
so for me it was
Mhm.
just like, why am I, why am
Mhm.
I going?
It's almost like you just have to like click the checkbox
Yeah,
and like,
yeah, it is for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we did have like a little bit, like a little scare with Chloe. At one of our midwife appointments, like we heard like her heart was like skipping a beat, like it would just like
Mm,
stop
okay.
beating, and then we would hear that like gap in the heartbeat, and
Mm,
then like
okay.
it would beat again, and that was a little,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
obviously concerning. So we went
Mhm.
to like a, I don't know what they're called, but
Like a
pediatric
cardiologist.
cardiologist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we did that while still
Yeah.
pregnant. He checked
Mhm.
everything out. Then we did a couple of follow-up appointments when she was born. She wore the heart monitor for like a day.
Oh, okay.
And I think it was a little bit of an anomaly because she did have a little bit of the I forget what it's called, but it's so normal for babies to have like that little gap in their heart and then it
Yeah.
closes up.
Yeah. Arteriosis something.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the name, but
Yeah.
I was like, I know my sister
Here, let me
had
find
it.
it.
Yeah.
Um, a lot like a lot of babies. Well, I think all babies are born with
Mhm. Mhm.
it's not fully fused because of the way the blood circulates while they're in
Yeah.
utero.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna Google it real quick. Yeah, so after birth, a baby's heart undergoes significant changes as it transitions from fetal circulation to a newborn circulation pattern. So this involves the closure of two key structures, the foramen oval, I don't know how to pronounce that, and the ductus arteriosus,
Mhm.
which is crucial for fetal circulation and are no longer needed after birth. So for some babies, sometimes that can take longer to
Mhm.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's what she had, and then they didn't find anything. It was like a one-time anomaly because we never heard that little
Mm,
like thing
okay, yeah.
again. So, but they wanted to keep an eye on that, and that was the only thing that like the midwife had a little sticking point on. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
might be worth, optioning the hospital just in case if we keep hearing this in subsequent
Yeah.
appointments,
Mm-hmm.
but then we never heard it again. And
Good.
then
Yeah.
the cardiologist appointment went, they didn't see anything abnormal. So the midwife's like, you know what? I'm comfortable having the home birth if you are. We'll
Mm-hmm.
just make sure to check her heart like as soon
Mm-hmm.
as you're comfortable, like after she's born, like
Mm-hmm.
give it a few
Yeah.
minutes and then we'll go in and check her heart just to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of like the one little change. But even then, I was like, I don't want to go to a hospital. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you
No,
know?
that's nice that your midwives were comfortable with that. Because so often
hmm
midwives will be like, oh, nope, you can't, or we won't do it. You have to go to the
Yeah.
hospital. So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
nice to give the parents the option. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what she said. She said, we'll keep a, we'll keep listening to her heart, and if we hear
Mm-hmm.
this reoccurring, then we might want to more strongly suggest a hospital.
Yeah.
Not an OB, but just to be at the hospital. So yeah, so she was comfortable with the home birth, and I said, great. And so yeah, so then I didn't want to do the birthing pool. I don't know why. I was
Mm.
just like, you know what? Nah, I
Yeah.
think I just comfortable in my
Yeah.
bed. Yeah, and
Yeah. And you had last time like you did the shower thing and it was enough for you, right? Like
yeah,
you felt fine. Yeah.
exactly. I felt good, and so, I didn't and I really did think I needed a birthing pool because I thought just the way that like home births were kind of like I guess, presented in a way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
often there's always a birthing pool,
Yes.
or it's just like, home births are in a
Yeah.
birthing pool. And
Yeah.
so when I spoke to the midwives, and they're like, no, like that's totally optional.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's like, you can just have the baby in your bed if you like so
Yeah.
where you're comfortable. You don't even have to have a birthing pool. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's great. Works for
Yeah,
me.
see, it's good to put this out there because
hmm
you're right. Like if on Instagram we always see the birthing pool for home births.
Yeah.
So it's good for other moms to know that like, or pregnant women to know that
hmm
you don't need that. It's optional.
It's
It can be
optional. Yeah.
great, but for some women
hmm
they're like, no, I don't want to labor in water. Like I'd
hmm
rather just have my bed or my shower. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So yeah, so Chloe, she was 40 weeks and 2 days.
Okay.
And yeah, and so like it was the same kind of experience, like no Braxton
Yeah.
Hicks, no
Wow.
pre-labor pains, like no signs. And I remember it was so funny. I have a picture of me snuggling my son, and I just had a feeling. I said, the last couple of days I'd been snuggling him in bed, and I'd let him sleep in
Mhm.
our bed a couple of days. And I just had a feeling I was like snuggling him. He was asleep. I
Oh.
have a photo of it. And I remember thinking, I said, this is the last night we're going to be a family of three. And it
Oh.
just felt like like an instinctual thing. And I
Yeah.
mean, I could have been wrong, like for sure.
Yeah.
But I just remember having this like overwhelming feeling. I'd be like,
Feeling,
this is the
yeah.
last time we're gonna be just the three of us.
No.
And so like I have this photo of him just sleeping like in my
Oh,
arms.
that's so sweet.
Um, yeah, and so then I went to bed that night. And then around 2:30 in the morning, I woke up and I thought I'd peed myself.
Uh,
And I was like, oh, I'm like, I don't normally lose
that's
control of
different.
my bladder,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, so I got up and I went to go to the bathroom because I'm like, oh, okay, so, pregnancy, pressure on the bladder, okay.
Yeah.
And so then I got up and then the leaking continued.
Uh,
Like we have a little half bath in our bedroom. And so I walked over, I waddled over to the bathroom, and then obviously I realized like, okay, this is not urine. This
yeah,
is,
yeah.
like my it's my water. And so I
Uh-huh.
called my husband from the bathroom, and it's so funny, he's such a heavy sleeper, but we were so on high alert for like any time this baby could
Yeah.
come that like a split second he was out of bed. He was like, what's going on? And I said, I'm pretty sure labor's starting.
Yeah.
And It was the same type of situation where it was like it was a slow leak of the
Mm-hmm.
fluid. My water hadn't burst, and then just like a very mild cramping has started, like very like
Started right
just
away.
started
Yeah.
like right away, just like a mild cramping, like kind of like just a mild period cramp,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was like, okay, so I'm like labor is starting, so we called the midwife. And she said, "Okay, you know what? I'm gonna start getting ready and like, I'll start heading over your way in a bit." And so she was like, like kind of like getting her things together.
Because this was
Um,
middle of the night still, right?
yeah, it was like 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so probably around like 3:30, the cramping had already like intensified quite a bit.
Mm.
So we called her and we said, "Hey, just so you know, like this has progressed like really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like the cramping is like really, really consistent. Like the
So this
contractions are really
time, were the
consistent.
contractions like by the book? Were they actually consistent this time, or still irregular?
Still irregular.
Still
Yeah, I
irregular.
didn't I didn't really time it this time
Mm-hmm.
because and I didn't feel the need to this time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't remember timing it, and maybe my husband
Yeah.
did, but I didn't. And I didn't feel the need to because the midwife was like, "Okay, because your labor progressed so quickly last
Yeah.
time, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna start heading your way."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I was like, "There's no point. She's
Yeah.
coming." You
And a
know?
lot of women do prefer not even bothering with the timing, especially in the
Mhm.
beginning, because you can be
Mhm.
so fixated on that that it can
Yeah.
like take you out of your body of just feeling it and just letting things progress. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this time, oh, I didn't mention this actually. One of the reasons we moved out to Oakville was when my son was, like we were close to the end of my leave, and my mom was always, no matter what, going to be my childcare. Like
Yes.
it was not optional for
Yes.
me, and it was not optional for her. She's like, I don't care what needs to happen, but
Yes.
I am your childcare.
Yes.
And so
I
we were
love
like,
that.
well, yeah, it's such a blessing that I
Such a
can have
blessing.
that because
Yes.
I mean to have your kids be raised by their grandparents, I
Oh, it's
mean,
the best.
there's
And it's so
nothing like it.
rare in
It
Canada.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So special.
Um and so like before I went my leave was done, me and my husband were sitting down and I said, "Well, I would like us to move closer to where I work or at least outside of the city a little bit." Toronto is a really lovely place. Born and raised in Toronto. I'd never known anything else. But we lived in a small little apartment. We had no green space. Like we didn't even have a
Mm.
patio that like
Yeah.
Gideon could play in. And like any green space that we wanted to take him to was a drive away.
Yeah.
And so we're like, this isn't really the place we want to raise a
Mm-hmm.
family. We would
Yeah.
love to have more room for him to play and grow.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we started looking west of the city, just to be
Yeah.
closer, because I work in Oakville.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we found this house, and they were renting it as two separate units,
Oh.
but it was like one house.
Yeah,
And so we
yeah.
reached out to the landlord and be like, "Hey, talk to my parents first." And my sister, lived with my parents at the time as well. And I said, "Hey, we're a family and we would love to like take the whole house, rent the whole
Mm-hmm.
house.
Yeah.
And we'd like, if you could help us out with that." And I mean, I think it worked out better for him because he's dealing with
Yeah, totally.
one group of
A
tenants
hundred
versus like
percent.
two,
Yes.
right? And so my parents agreed as well.
That's
And
amazing.
so yeah, so by the time I went back to work, like we live in one unit, my parents live in the unit
That's
downstairs,
so
and
good.
like we have the
Oh,
childcare.
yes.
So
That's how
so
it
yeah,
should be.
it's how it should be. It's worked
Yeah.
amazingly well.
Yeah.
And so then so when I was pregnant with Chloe, I'm laboring at home. So like as soon as my labor
Yeah.
starts, like I call my mom because she's already on high alert. She knows like I'm due
Yes.
any day now. I tell her, I'm like, "Hey," she's like, "You're in labor." I said, "Yes."
Yeah.
She's like, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Come upstairs."
So good. Yeah.
Yeah, so she comes upstairs and she's with me throughout the entire laboring process. The
Oh.
midwife gets here, and she had called the other midwife to come as well. And so she's getting set up, she's checking me, like labor is getting like progressively like more intense and more intense.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it was more like quite a bit more painful for the
Mm.
second labor
Yeah.
than my first. And
Mm.
I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think personally is because I didn't have like that buildup of like kind of getting
Yeah.
used to different levels of pain and it like slowly
Yeah.
building up and up. Like it built up so quickly to like an
Mm-hmm.
intense level that was like quite
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah. I often hear that the
Yeah.
fast labors, like you don't have time to adapt. That even though
Mm-hmm.
they're faster, they're almost too much to like you can't keep up. Like it's just
Can't
too
process it.
fast. Yeah, I can't process
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the midwife comes, we know we're checking baby's heart, everything is going well. She's checking me, no problems. That's something, and like I didn't have a problem with her checking how far along I was. I know like some women don't enjoy that or don't like it, and I had no problem with it. And she was always very clear, like if, like if you need me to stop for whatever reason, just tell me.
Yeah.
And so like a couple of times if like a really intense
Mm-hmm.
contraction would come
Yeah.
and she was in the middle of doing something, I would tell her to stop and like immediately she just, and and she really let me labor the way that I wanted to labor.
Yeah, good.
And like the clinic that I went in Toronto, they were lovely and it was my first experience and I really enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
their care. But I think that the clinic that I was here gave me even more freedom to just do
Mm.
things the way that I wanted to
Yes.
do,
Yeah.
like completely zero intervention,
Good.
like
Yeah.
nothing, just
As it
really
should
good.
be.
Yeah, like just like really good positive reassurance, like
Yeah.
just meeting me where I was versus
Yeah.
like, like she's like right where you are if you're comfortable, can I do this? Like,
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
need to, can I help you do this or do you need to move? Do you need assistance?
Mm-hmm.
You know.
It also
And
seems
so,
that when it's not your first baby, you get this like
mhm.
level of respect. They're like, you've done this
Yeah,
before.
you
We'll
done this
back
before,
off
you
a
got
little
this.
bit. Right.
Yeah. So that went really well. And so, labor is intensifying. And my mom is here with me, my husband, and the one midwife. And then the other midwife was coming. And so, and the same thing happened as with Gideon. As soon as my water like burst, that was it. It
Mm,
was push time. It was instant.
yeah.
Instantly, my body just started pushing, just like last time.
Yeah.
And it happened so quickly because I remember maybe 5 minutes before my water broke, like fully, because it
Mm-hmm.
was just like a slow leak. Uh,
Mm.
about 5 minutes, she had checked me, and I was at 4 centimeters.
Oh, wow.
And within 5 minutes, my water had burst and it was push time. Like I was fully
Wow.
dilated.
That's amazing. And that's so
Yeah.
important. I'm glad you
Mhm,
mentioned that because a lot of women will think, oh, four. Well, just like me. Like, I had been
mhm.
in labor for 24 hours and I was only at 4 centimeters and I was already feeling a little pushy
Yeah.
because my waters burst first, first thing,
Hmm.
and then the contraction started. And by the time I got to the hospital, I was 5 centimeters, and then we did the C-section for
Hmm.
breech. But a lot of women think that like you're gonna go by the book and it's gonna be
Yeah.
that usually
Hmm.
once you're into active labor around 5 centimeters that it's gonna be 1 centimeter per hour, and
Yeah.
that's not always the case.
No.
So
Yeah.
to always expect that or to tell women that like, oh,
Mhm.
it's still gonna be another 10 hours, you're only at 4 centimeters, it can be so like disappointing to hear that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
then there are women like you that,
Mhm.
especially when you're super comfortable and you're at home and you're
Yeah.
relaxed, your
Yeah.
body can go from 4 to 10 just like that.
Yeah.
So
Just like
it's pretty
that. It
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a yeah, it was such a great, like a beautiful experience really and so, like when that happened and it was like push time, like I had like I was laying in bed. Same thing, side lying was kind of what was comfortable for me. My
Mm-hmm.
husband was on one side. My mom was like, "What do you need me to do?" And so like I had her on the other side. I'm like squeezing her hand for dear life.
No. So
And
nice.
she got to like, experience the whole labor from start to
Yeah.
finish. And that
Oh.
was so important for me and for her because like
Yeah.
she wanted to be there the first time and I wanted her there so badly. And if you know my
Yeah.
mom, she's like so
Yes.
maternal, like
Yes.
she's got such a big heart. And like
Oh.
to have missed the birth of her first grandchild, and not
Yeah.
and not by choice, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
It was circumstance. It was
Of
so
course.
heartbreaking for
Yeah.
both of us.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh.
and so she was there, and so then yeah, so then water broke, sideline, same thing. I had like my husband, my mom on both you know, on the other side. My son sleeping in his bedroom, like next
Because what
door.
time was this now when you started pushing?
So I started pushing around, like I would say it was like 5:55,
Oh, wow.
5:56.
Yeah.
And so then, and she was born at 6:02.
Wow.
Yeah,
So like
it was
three
very,
hour.
very, yeah, very,
Yeah.
very quick.
Wow.
And it was so funny. Just as my daughter was crowning, my son woke up and I could hear him calling
Oh.
me. And he was like, Mamai, Mamai.
Like, what's
I
going
was,
on?
what's going And so it was so funny, and I knew, you know, having have had been the second time, I knew in just like a minute or two baby girl was going to be born.
Yeah.
And so I could hear him calling, but I you know, he's fine. He was in his room. He just woken
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
He was,
Yeah.
you know, so I said it's okay. Like in a few minutes we'll go get
Yeah.
him and this
Yeah, yeah.
we'll have a baby in our arms.
Yes.
And so
That's
yeah,
so
so
special.
yeah, it was so beautiful. So at like 6:02, baby girl was born, and then my mom my mom says she flew out like a rocket. So she jokes about it because like once like her head like came out, it was just like
Yeah. Like, whoop. Yep.
out.
Yep.
And my mom had never seen a birth before, you
No.
know, and
Yeah.
so that was like to her was like I just was not expecting it to happen so fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, And so the midwife, you know, grabbed baby, put her on my chest. My mom was able to cut the cord. My
Oh.
husband was not interested in cutting the cord.
Yeah.
He did it for Gideon, and that's okay. Like it was just kind
Yeah.
of like it was a little
It
creepy for
is,
him,
yeah, a little squeamish, and
a
if you're
little
not into
squeamish.
that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we had discussed it previously, and we surprised my mom with that and told her like
Oh.
you're cutting the cord, and so that was
Oh.
really big for her.
That's so nice.
Um,
Yeah.
like right after, you know, I don't know if it was my husband or my mom who went to go get my son, and so like she's minutes old, and like my son's coming into the
Oh.
bedroom,
That's
you
so
know,
nice.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then we called my dad and my sister as well, who were kind of like standing
Mm-hmm.
by, and we're like,
Yeah.
you know, they heard the baby cry, so like they started
Oh,
coming
from
upstairs.
downstairs. Oh, that's
Yeah,
so lovely. I love this.
yeah.
What a
So
beautiful story.
yeah, so it was
Yeah.
really was like a beautiful like a family, and like I said, it was the way
Mm-hmm.
that it really was like the birth experience that I wanted,
Yes.
you know, and I really did want my family there. I really
Yeah.
wanted my mom there, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't expect my son to, you know, to kind of like be there minutes after she was born, but I wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
had it any other way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
It sounds like
so
it worked out perfectly. Yeah.
yeah, and it's so interesting that, you know, when, at least for me, I, and you know me, like I've always been like super shy, super
Mm-hmm.
timid, and like
Yeah.
quiet for the most part. And for me to just be like so like exposed really in this moment
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
like childbirth, it's like everything else just kind of fell away. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no room to be shy. There's no room
Yeah.
to be timid
Yeah.
because like in that moment you're going through this experience that is solely yours.
Yeah.
And it was so nice to be able to experience it around the people that made me the most comfortable and
Yes.
an environment that made me comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, it started with the birthing center where it was kind of like, I can do this, you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
I can do this, like, I can
Yeah.
do it. Like, I don't have to go to a hospital. I don't have to get an epidural, you know, if I don't need it, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can get through the pain. And because
Mm-hmm.
the way that I saw it, I was like, okay, yes, it's painful, really painful, but there's an end to it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when
Mm-hmm.
baby's born, there's going to be a release of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, having this experience, having Chloe at home, it was honestly like it was better than I could have imagined, and I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that my body was like, let's do this. Let's do this the way, that my body was able to do that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, so I'm just grateful. I'm just really happy.
Amazing. So
Hmm.
good. And I think it's so important to share these stories. And like you said, like first time you're like, okay, let's try birth center. And then you're like, oh, this went really well. Okay, no, I can totally do this at home.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes that, but I think if we start to shift the narrative that this is what we all do, we all
Hmm.
try at home.
Hmm.
If there's no complications, it's healthy pregnancy, there's nothing that we should really be in a hospital for. And then for the women that truly need to go to the hospital, whether
Hmm.
it's a complication or whether they just need an epidural, if only those women went to the hospital and not everybody started off at the hospital, we would probably be able to have better hospital births because there would be less women. Like we wouldn't have to push them out and like give them so many
Yes.
interventions because we need to speed them up.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
majority of women started trying out to have
Hmm.
births at home and realize that it can be absolutely beautiful and magical and so safe, and it can be so
Yes.
nice having your family in your home, and then once you're
Hmm.
done, this time you didn't even have to get in a car to go back
No,
home, you're already in your
exactly.
bed. Yeah.
Yes. And the midwives were so lovely. Like they cleaned up everything. They got rid of like it was like no work on our part. Like there was a
Yeah.
little bit of prep on our part like involved. Like
Mm-hmm.
we had a list of things that we needed to get, and like we had the bed prepped, with like
Mm-hmm.
a a sheet with like a
Shower
tarp,
curtain,
shower
yeah, or
curtain. That's
tarp
what we
or
had,
something,
shower
yeah.
curtain with another sheet on top. Like we
Yeah.
were ready. And they like stripped everything down, and like then we were just like we could just be in the
Yeah.
moment and like be with
Yeah.
baby, and we were already home. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because if it wasn't for my experience with the naturopath, I would have 100% gone what is now the traditional route
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
going to a hospital.
Yeah.
Um, and because I didn't know the option was available to me. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until she mentioned that and I became aware of it that I began doing so much
Yeah.
research.
Yeah.
And then I also became aware of so many things that I didn't realize were problematic,
Totally.
even, when women get cut at the hospital to like,
Mm-hmm.
and like it's unnecessary,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Most of the
Um,
time.
most of the time it's
Yeah.
unnecessary. And so I was so afraid that that was going to happen to me without my knowledge
Mm-hmm.
because I've heard that you don't get asked.
Yeah.
Like
A lot
maybe you
sometimes you
do,
don't.
but sometimes you just hear the snip and it's done.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that terrified me. I was like, well, how do you
Yeah.
know how much to snip? What if you
Yeah.
oversnipped? You know?
Yep. Home births are just as safe statistically, if there's no complications. For, like the maternal and fetal health is like on par. The
Hmm.
difference is that you have way less chance of having a surgical birth, whether it's the use of forceps
Hmm.
or needing to get an episiotomy or ending up in a
Hmm.
C-section,
Hmm.
than if you started off in the hospital. So if more
Hmm.
women started off at home, knowing that it is just as safe and that they might
Yeah.
just want to have their whole birth at home,
Hmm.
as opposed
Hmm.
to starting in the hospital, we would definitely see a reduction in that. So
Hmm.
I think it's so important for us to keep spreading this message. Like you said, you only found out about this by talking to your naturopath. And in Ontario, it's free. But even if you are located somewhere where you'd have to pay for a private
Hmm.
midwife, it's one of those things that it's worth it. The same way we
Yes.
pay for things for our wedding and this and that.
Yep.
Your birth, it's one of those things that, like, yes, save for it. If you have to pay for
Yes.
it, but you can pay and have the experience you want, it's worth
Hmm.
it. Save that
Hmm.
money and do it. Yeah.
Hmm. I even had a friend, she had three C-sections, and they were necessary for her. But her last baby, she went to a midwife just to have the consistent care through
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
pregnancy with the knowledge that she would be going into the hospital for a
Yeah.
C-section. And
Yeah.
they were nice enough to take her into their
Wow.
care as well,
Amazing.
and
Yeah.
just to just kind of get her, like make sure that,
Mm-hmm.
because one of those same thing where her two first experiences was like every time she went into the clinic, it was someone different who didn't know her history, who didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what questions had already been asked or hadn't been asked, and
Yeah.
so with her last baby, she got in with a midwife clinic who was happy to just, go through and help her through the pregnancy portion of there and to support her that way. And then she went in for her C-section to have her third baby.
Mm.
And
Interesting.
so
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting because I,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that maybe it was like an isolated
Mm-hmm.
case where they were
Yeah.
just, like very,
Mm-hmm.
open and willing to just
Yeah.
help her through
Mm-hmm.
this.
Yeah.
Um, but I
Yeah,
think,
that
like you
is
said,
cool. Yeah.
it's so worth it. It's so worth it,
Yeah. And people who do end up getting a midwife and in the end do need to actually have a C-section,
Mhm.
you'll just switch over to the on call, but
Yeah,
you will have that follow up with your midwife after, which is really
exactly.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
before we finish off, I just wanted to ask, is there
yes.
any piece of advice that you would like to share for fellow new moms, pregnant moms, or women that are going to be pregnant or planning? Just if there is something you wish you knew, what you've learned in your journey that you can
Mhm.
pass along, what would it be?
Um, Midwife care, 100% if it's an option for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if it's available to you, save for it, plan ahead, fill in a form as quickly as possible because the spots fill up,
Yeah.
and so you'll be able to get your spot in. And also, there is so much advice out there when it comes to women and motherhood and birth and raising children. And all of us are different. We all have unique experiences. We all come from different cultures and backgrounds. And all of our children are different. So, what works for one mama might not work for another mama. And so, it's so just try not to fall into the this is what I should be doing, because I know so many moms, even our moms ourselves, it's like, oh, this is what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, maybe that's not what's best for me
Mm-hmm.
and my
Yeah.
child. And so it's, taking advice is great, but at the end of the day, like, your baby, your body, and at the end of the day, like, do what is right for you and your family.
Yeah, that's
So,
beautiful. Thank you. And thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your experience with postpartum depression because it's such an important topic. A lot of
mhm,
women go through it and again don't acknowledge that what's happening. So it's
mhm,
so important that we're more open about this because it
mhm,
is so common, especially in cases where you're isolated, where you don't have community.
mhm.
So if you need the help, get the help, talk to someone,
Yeah,
and don't suffer alone because
yeah.
it will be better for you and for your child and for your family overall. So if
Mhm,
you are
mhm.
struggling with postpartum depression, and it can, like you said, you started noticing 6 months in, it sometimes not immediate, like sometimes even up to a year is when it flares
Yeah,
up. So if you do
yeah.
notice anything like that, don't suffer alone. Definitely get some help.
Definitely. I would say therapy is important because sometimes you can't talk to the people closest to you, and
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to talk to someone who can look at it from the outside in.
Yeah.
And so I highly recommend if it's within your means or even if you have to budget for it and
Mm-hmm.
do it just for a little bit just to get yourself
Yeah.
started. It doesn't have to be long term. It's just
Mm-hmm.
for,
Yeah.
to get you through that little hump. It's worth it.
Exactly. And they can even give you some tools. Like if you can't
Hmm.
afford to do many sessions, they can give you tools so that you
Hmm.
can work on it alone as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Danielle.
Thanks
It
for
was so
having
nice
me.
chatting with you. I loved the conversation, loved your beautiful stories.
Thank
So I really
you.
appreciate you sharing it with the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have
All
a
right.
great day.
You
Bye,
too.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Birth Unboxed. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more, please consider subscribing to the podcast so you never miss an episode and leaving a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts or even your own birth stories, so feel free to connect with me via Instagram at thebirthunboxed.podcast or through my website linked in the show notes. Until next time, friends.